The Connection Show. Inspiring hope. Health. Healing. Sponsored by Brave Heart Workshops. Live with Jill Reynolds. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like our page. Share it. Subscribe to it now and click the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming shows.
The Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing. Sponsored by Braveheart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today from Oklahoma is Joy Thayer. Welcome to the show, Joy.
Hi, Jill. Thanks so much for having me.
And I always close all my background apps. And of course, the second we went live, one popped up. So I apologize for that.
Oh, good.
Well, we love connecting people on the Connection Show, Joy. And one of the things we love to do is connect the dots of story, the good, the bad, and sometimes the hardships and the more painful things, so that as people hear your story, Joy, hopefully they'll have transformation in their life. And I got this feeling from the Lord about a year ago, right before I was starting to watch The Chosen, where I saw Jesus walking down the path, sharing stories, accounts, and parables. And Matthew asked him one day, Jesus, why do you say these weird things? And he said, so lives can be transformed. So if you wouldn't mind, would you take us back into your childhood, Joy, and share with us what it was like growing up for you as a little girl, and then up to adulthood, what are some of the struggles you've had in life and some of the good things that led you to who you are today?
Yeah, that's good. My dad and mom were in a little tiny town called Hayfork, California, when I was born. And I was actually born in a small town called Weaverville because that was the closest place that had a hospital. And lived in Hayfork until I was about 5 years old. And then my parents moved us over to Maui, Hawaii, because they went over to a YWAM base over there, and they DTS'd over there, and then they were on staff over there for a couple of years. And I actually fell in love with Jesus and entertainment on that YWAM base, because it was the arts and entertainment base, and all of these people would come from all over the world, and they would learn about God and what His plans and purposes were for their life, and then they would take it through the medium of art to go out and share that with the world. And so I got saved there. I don't think I've ever not been a Christian, but I realized when I was little that I needed Jesus and that He was very real to me. And He became my best friend at a very young age. My parents moved us from there in the second grade to outside of Whitefish, Montana, a place called Lakeside. And they started the YWAM base there. So I went from multicultural and tropics to white and cold. And by white and cold, I mean white people, white snow, white everything. And it was cold. And their food was bland. You know, I went from having, delicious foods of all different kinds and people from all over the globe coming to the arts and entertainment base to be completely different culture. So that was a little bit hard for me, and I didn't quite know my place then. I had two older brothers. I was the only girl, and I had all male cousins. I grew up racing cars and learning how to fix them and having lots of adventures and in a very male world. And every aspect. And growing up in the church and being a female and being outspoken, and my name is Joy, was somewhat difficult at the time and in the times that I was raised. My mom was a huge advocate for the prophetic, and my dad and my brothers always said that you can do anything a boy can do, just make sure that you wear shorts under your dress so when you're climbing trees, so nobody wants to see all of that under there. And so I was surrounded by very strong, very amazing men that empowered me just to be me. And I loved wearing pink, and I loved dresses, and I loved makeup, and I liked cars, and I liked stereotypical boy things, and I learned how to embrace just being feminine in my way, and I didn't have to change being a girl to fit in with the boys. I wanted to do the activities that they were doing, but I wanted to do it as me. And so I was very fortunate to have such amazing parents when I was growing up. And I think some of the hardships is my parents moved a lot. I went to 23 different schools by the time I was in ninth grade.
Oh my goodness.
That was very unstable for me, and experiencing different churches and different backgrounds and different religious beliefs, and some very domineering backgrounds, and there was just a lot of things my parents went through. We didn't do most holidays growing up. My mom went into doing history and research and finding out the pagan origins of a lot of the holidays, and so she said I can't be doing these holidays because of that. So that was also difficult for me as a child when everybody was going out and they were doing Halloween, and I had never once did Halloween growing up. So I'll tell you a story later about that. But yeah, so I would feel very sad and very lonely and very displaced. I constantly felt like I didn't fit in with the boys because they were all boys, and growing up with being surrounded with boys, that's who I was around. And then I didn't fit in with adults because I was a child, but I was around adults all the time. So I didn't quite feel like I had a place. I didn't fit in anybody's box. And so I just felt very lonely. And like I said earlier, God was just my best friend. And so by the time I was 15, I was having dreams about owning businesses and about doing all of these things. And when I would share that with people in my world, they would tap me on the head and they'd say, "Oh, cute, honey, you have your head in the clouds and you don't know what it takes to do these things." And there's probably some truth to that. I didn't know what it took to do some of the things that were on my heart, but nobody showed me what to do and how to get there as well. And I think that would be something that I wish would have happened different, is they say, oh, if you want to own businesses, you need to learn these skill sets, but they didn't know the skill sets. So I wasn't around people that had entrepreneurial backgrounds, that had, finance degrees. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a cook. They were missionaries, and they were hardworking, amazing American people, but they just didn't have the ability to teach me some of the skill sets that I wanted to learn. So rather than encouraging the things that were in my heart, I constantly was finding people just thinking that I was just a daydreamer, and they would downplay stuff. So I got to some point in my life that I had an image of what women were supposed to be. I had an image of what men were like. I had an image of my life was either going to be small or the world was going to end. And so at 15 years old, I actually planned my daughter. I got pregnant, and I had been with my boyfriend for about 1.5 years. We hadn't been having sex. I didn't believe in having sex before we were married. So I talked to my mom and I said, I want to get married. And she, like a good mom, told me that I couldn't get married at 15. And so.
Oops, you just froze up. Are you there? You just froze. Hold on. Testing. 1, 2. You just froze. I hope we didn't lose you. I'm going to text you to see. Well, while we're frozen here in time, I'm going to ask Joy to re-sign in because this is so good. Re-sign in. So while we're frozen, I'm going to go to commercial for just a moment and show Joy's bio and have her bio on the screen here real quick. And then hopefully, as she joins back in, she'll re-sign in. We can continue with the interview because it's such an amazing story. So we'll have Joy come back on and tell us some more of her story and see if we can continue this. So thanks so much for joining the Connection Show. One thing I love about what Joy's sharing today is I love the Pixar animated film called Inside Out. And if you remember seeing that film, the little girl in the film, her name was Joy. and they moved from Minnesota to California. And when Joy moved with her family, she loved playing hockey and she was really popular at school. But when she moved, she felt so disconnected and so sad that she told her mom that she wished she had never moved. And her mom, and so her dad wouldn't feel bad, told Joy to stuff down her sadness so her dad wouldn't feel bad. So as Joy stuffed down her sadness, her little worlds around her started to cave in. And so she started acting out with anger and despair, and different emotions came to the surface. And she kept trying to push them down, kind of like that little arcade game where you take the thing and you hit down all the different faces that pop up. So that's what the little girl did, is she kept popping down the faces so her emotions would be shut down. But they kept acting out. So towards the end of the movie, finally, Joy's sadness kept trying to show up. And finally, Joy, the little girl, let sadness in, and she just cried, and she grieved the loss of her friendships in Minnesota. And after she was able to grieve her pain, then she was able to bring her joy back. So anyway, I thought that was really cool. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. So we're going to pause right now and see if Joy gets back on. Reload. I'm telling her to reload Zoom, and we'll see if we can just start again and take over. So I'm going to break right now to a commercial.
Hydrogen is used by health professionals as a powerful antioxidant and the #1 tool to fight inflammation. Studies show therapeutic potential in cancer, diabetes, digestive, and heart issues, and essentially every organ and system in the body. This is not medical advice, because I'm not your doctor, but if you have any health concerns, I strongly recommend that you learn more about hydrogen. Get educated at holyhydrogen.com and order the best hydrogen generator known to man. Use code BRAVEHEART for $100 off your order. Because hydrogen is the smallest molecule in existence, it can pass through the cell membrane and even the blood-brain barrier to clear out inflammation and free radical damage where other antioxidants just can't get to. Visit holyhydrogen.com to see the latest technology that elevates your immune system and fights inflammation. Search their research library to see if hydrogen has a track record for helping a health concern you're dealing with. Make sure to use code BRAVEHEART for $100 off your order. Remember, holyhydrogen.com.
Well, welcome back to the show, and Joy did get back on. And so we just kind of talked a little bit, Joy, while you were trying to log back on, so we can do one or two things, start all over again, or just keep going, because that's what life's like. So
I think we just keep going. Like you said, that's what life is like.
Yeah, because, life's like that. Sometimes things fall off and come back on. And I did notice, which is, my imperfection, I noticed on the screen here, you have a movie that you guys made called The Trump I Know, and I spelled it the Trump in know. So I didn't mean to put in. It should say The Trump I Know. And I just noticed my own imperfections of spelling incorrectly. While you were off, Joy, I shared the story with the audience about Joy, the little girl Joy, in the animated film Inside Out. Did you ever watch Inside Out?
Yes.
So I shared with them the story of how Joy was so sad when they moved from Minnesota to California, and how her little worlds caved in, and how that had some significance with your little story of having to move around, and then the sadness that sets in. And when we stuff our emotions, sometimes our worlds around us start to cave in. And in that movie, Joy's anger started to pop out and her despair, and she kept pushing it down. So we shared that story while you were off air, and then we played a Holy Hydrogen commercial. So
nice.
No steps missed at all. So let's jump back in, and let's see. I'm trying to remember where we left off because I got just distracted. So help me out. Do we remember we were...
It depends on when I got cut off, but I just had my daughter when I was 16 years old.
Yeah, you got cut off where you had asked your mom if you could get married.
Yeah.
And she looked at you like you were crazy. And then we got cut off around that time when you asked your mom if you could get married.
Okay. Yeah. No, she definitely was a good mom and said that, heck no, you can't get married. You're only 15 years old and you got some things to do before you take that leap. Like I said before, I was very mature being raised around adults. I knew how to clean. I knew how to cook. I knew how to do a lot of things. I was half homeschooled in the middle of all of it. So I was a very capable human, but definitely some of my thought processes were the thought processes of a 15-year-old and very immature. And I was trying to solve my own problems. And while God was my best friend, I hadn't fully understood on how to rely on him for everything. So I ended up getting pregnant at 15, and I had my daughter when I was 16, and she was the light of my life, 8 pounds, 6.5 ounces, little Georgia.
And you didn't marry him, you just ended up getting pregnant.
I didn't. We ended up together for 7 years, and we didn't end up getting married. We had a wedding when I was 16, but it wasn't legal because in California you couldn't legally get married without your parents' signature, and my parents wouldn't sign the paperwork. And I forever tell my mom, thank you for not doing that. And so we had been together, like I said, for 7 years. But in the meantime, a few years later, I finished high school and homeschool. I raised Georgia. We had a ranch. We had cows and horses, and she went everywhere with me and did everything. And then when I was 19, decided to have baby number 2 with Georgia's father, and I got pregnant. And at 20, he was born. And when he was born with a rare genetic syndrome. And his father and I both have malfunction genes, and it malfunctioned in him. And so he was born with failure to thrive. And he was born where he had no head, neck, or trunk control or anything. And when that happened, his dad kept saying, well, he'll grow out of it. And it was a genetic thing. So he either needed a miracle or he wasn't going to live a long life. And so his dad checked out, and I went into go mode. So Georgia and I had we went to 9 regular doctors a year with her brother Sawyer, and found out what he was dealing with. And I'd never been around anybody disabled before. And I was breastfeeding at the time, and he was vomiting about 8 to 15 times a day. And so I was nursing quite a bit to help replenish that. And so we just did a lot of hard things that first year. And after that first year, I realized that this was going to be my life with this man. This man wasn't a Christian. This man didn't have any major ambitions. He was very hardworking. Very smart, not very educated. And he had developed a drinking problem, and I decided that while I was in love with him and we had been together for many years, that I needed to make a different choice for my daughter and for my son and myself. And so we moved to Redding, California, and my son ended up having a very large seizure that lasted over an hour and a half, and flew us down to UC Davis Medical Center. And lots of different things had happened, and he ended up dying from them trying to overdose him to restart his heart. And when they did that, they brought me over some papers and said, you just need to let him go, and here's some paperwork to sign. And they were pretty much just trying to get liability off of the hospital for him passing away, which wouldn't have been their fault anyway. They did everything they could to stop the seizure, and then he overdosed. And so one way or another, he was going to die, whether it was from the seizure or the medication. So I said, no, you restart his heart. God told me that he was going to live and not die. And they were very frustrated with me, and they restarted his heart. And after that, my life changed all over again. And he he was worse than he was before as far as disabilities go. So he used to be hyper flexible, so he had double jointed, and this made him pull really tight, which is called spastic. And so his hands pulled in, his everything pulled in. And they said that, when he was born, that the average age of life was a year, the second average age was 12, and the oldest living was between 23 and 24, and that he was one of the worst cases. And so they continually told me that he was going to die anytime. So for that first couple of years, he just slept right on my chest, and I was just waiting for him to pass away. And God said to me one night, he said, deal with his death when he's dead. And right now, just treat him like he's going to live forever, and then you cross that bridge when you get there. So that's what I started doing. I just decided that he was going to do everything with me. And so if we fast forward a little bit, I just rededicated my entire life to the Lord. And I said, you know what? Whatever you have for me, whatever you want, I want to do that. And he said, well, I want you to do the things that I placed on your heart as a little girl, the things that you put on the shelf that you didn't go after, the dreams that people told you that were too big. I want you to do those. And now at this point, I'm thinking, Lord, those were too big then. Now I'm a single mom. I have, 2 children, one severely disabled. They're extra hard now. And he doesn't seem to have a problem with that. So I went to college. I took my son. I talked to the dean at the school, and I talked to the teachers, and most all my teachers would let my son come with me. And it took me 11 years to get my AA degree, because I would start a whole semester of classes. If something would happen to Sawyer, I would have to cancel all my classes and start over again. The good thing about that is the second time around, things were a lot easier because I had done most of the work. And I took Georgia with me and dropped her off at the daycare center there, or, at school at the time when she started kindergarten and everything. And I went after my degree in media communications. And so that's how if I catch up to some of the work that I'm doing now. But there's more to that story, so I don't know quite where you want to head. But that was my.
This is so transformational.
So after all of that, there was some different things. I'd gotten remarried as an adult, and to a gentleman that I met at church. Pretty quickly after we got married, found out that he had an addiction to pornography, and it was pretty heinous pornography. And I had addressed that, and he became very violent in different things. We ended up having a daughter together. So when I was 24, I'm in a very unhealthy relationship with somebody that doesn't want to be married, that had come from the church. So I think that here, I married I was with the person that I loved that wasn't a Christian. Here I married a Christian, and I went from bad to worse. And so in the meantime, I go through a very long divorce, and my divorce takes about 2.5 years. I go into hiding from my husband because he has made some very strong threats and different things that I fully believed that he would have executed on. And so during that 2.5 year divorce, I ended up meeting what is my husband now, who is Matthew Thayer. And we have now been together for 15 years and going on 16 years together, 15 years married. And so I was in the middle of my divorce. My father, my truck driving father, would drive my son and I down to Los Angeles about 8 times a year. And he would watch my son while I would go in and audition for parts in films. And then he would watch him if I went into production courses. And then we would head all the way back to Northern California. And I would sleep on the ride back, and he would manage everything during the day. And so I meet Matt, and I tell him all these dreams and how I now have favor down in Los Angeles, and that I really feel like God is calling me to the entertainment industry, and I have, been faithful with all these things. And so Matt and I start dating, and Matt says, I want to go with you. I want to direct films. I have these ideas in my head. And he brought 2 daughters into our relationship. And so we just start pursuing this together. But God says, I want you to stay up in Northern California and build the film industry from Northern California. And I'm very frustrated because here I have all these open doors, and I've always been told if you have open doors, that's God. And now I hear God and I know God's voice, and he's saying, just because the door's open doesn't mean you should walk through it. And what I have for you is better. And so I argued with him for a couple weeks. And that's just a relationship I have with the Lord, is I want to understand. And he is so okay. And he's so confident and so patient that I'm not just a follower just to, if somebody says to do something, I question authority, which sometimes isn't great, but that's also who I am as a person. And so he walked me through it.
That's your feminine side. And you're climbing the trees with the boy side.
It is. And so he just said, I have plans for you. And I said, okay, you know what? If I just have to trust you, then I'm going to lay everything down, because if you're not with me 100%. And I also felt like he said, if you want to go, I'll bless it. I'll be with you. But I wanted what he had, and he sees everything. So I laid it down, stayed in Redding. Matt and I merged families. We got married. Built a strong foundation. I didn't actually pursue anything with Hollywood for the next 2 years in the middle of merging our families. And I just wanted to make sure that we had very solid and secure humans, that we were raising them and not putting our ambitions first. And so after that, Matt had been taking directing courses, and he'd been 100% homeschooled his entire life. So he started researching. He was working as a waiter at a high-end restaurant for many years so that we could make decent money and him educate himself in the film industry. And so we went on a script writing cruise, and we started really pursuing how our roles meshed. And I started doing stuff, producing, and because I could do that from home, I could raise kids, I could take care of my son, and acting would pull me away from the home. And while that was what I wanted to do for me, and I wanted to entertain people and make them laugh, I really felt like as long as I could tell stories and get these stories that God had out there, that I was doing something. So I started helping Matt produce projects. He was directing the projects. I would pull the team together. I don't know how to turn on our own cameras. I know all the people that know how to do everything. I know a lot of people, and I love well, and I know quality. And so that became my role. Is everybody said, what do you do? And I said, I'm just a mom. Whether I'm at home or on set, I'm a mom. And we integrated our kids with it. So one of our first short films was a short film called Lemonade. Matt taught his daughter Faith how to write. Our kids acted in it. Their friends were in it. And it has over 8 million views on YouTube today. And my son, my severely disabled son, was on set for so many of our corporate and commercial projects. I would be at home, phone calling people or doing emails. And the only awkward thing is he was a mouth breather and he couldn't talk. So I'd be on a business call with somebody down in Los Angeles, and he's in the back going, and I'm like, you have to do a little explainer every time. That's my son. He's with me. I have to be in the room with him because he needs, assistance very quickly if something happens. And most everybody was so gracious and understanding, as long as they knew what that noise was in the background. Or Matt won Best Director at a film festival down in Los Angeles, and we said, we're bringing our son with us. He's disabled. We'll sit in the back. We'll make sure that he's dressed up with, to dress code and everything. And he would just go with us to all of these different places. And if we had doctor's appointments, we'd make a family trip out of it. So one time we had a doctor's appointment down in Los Angeles. The kids had waited so patiently the whole entire time, and because you have the appointment, but you have the waiting room, and then we call it the second waiting room because you go in and wait for the doctor inside the room, and then you have the checkup with him, and then you've drove all this way, and so then we'd take the kids and we went to Disneyland. We would do all these things, and we said our son was our VIP. He got his front row parking, and he got us to the front of lines at Disneyland, and so we just did life like that. And so then I got the opportunity to work on a feature film called I Can Only Imagine. I worked on that. Matt, it was the first time I left Sawyer at home, and Matt took care of him. My parents helped take care of him. And in the middle of I Can Only Imagine, prior to going on I Can Only Imagine, found out that my dad had prostate cancer, and that they found it at 4th stage, and that there was no getting rid of it. Again, it was one of those things that needed a miracle, or I wasn't going to have my dad around anymore. And he was my best friend. And so in the middle of filming I Can Only Imagine, where a father dies of cancer, my father died of cancer. And so I went home for 2 weeks. It happened to be during Christmas break, so I had hired my production coordinator from our corporate and commercial side to come out and take my job. And so my dad ended up passing away on Matt and I's wedding anniversary. And that was really, really difficult. And so I was working on that project. I went back out to work on that project. I pretty immediately, my dad died December 27th. I think we went back on set like January 5th or 6th or something like that. And went out there, and I just put a pin in my emotions while I finished out the job. On my ending credits, it says that I'm a cast PA, which I did for a whole 2 weeks on the project. I was on the production team of the project, but like I said, I ended up hiring somebody else to take my position, and they gave her my credit on the film. And so that project, I ended up developing relationships with the producer. Is one of my dearest friends, Lefevre, and I met executive producer Joe Knapp on that project, and then they presented the opportunity to work on Unplanned, which is a true life story of Abby Johnson, who used to be a Planned Parenthood director. And when working on that project, I said yes to that one pretty quickly. When she was a Planned Parenthood director, she actually ended up witnessing an abortion that was up around 13 weeks. And she had been a part of thousands of abortions, but she was on the office side and hadn't seen them. And so when she had experienced one firsthand, she realized, what am I doing? And so when they presented the project to me, it was an easy yes, because over the course of my son's life, I actually had the legal right to euthanize him. When he was born, they offered to leave him in the room next to us and let him pass because they couldn't find anything wrong with him, but they knew that he was going to die. And if we just denied him of life-sustaining nutrients, that he would pass of natural causes. And so that was, 24 years ago now. And now California is coming out with all of these after birth abortions, and we're allowing it up to 2, and they're trying to push for up to 3 years old. So when he was born, I was offered that. And then when he was a young man, there was Terry Shrivo's case that had happened. And Terry Shrivo was a happy, healthy, vibrant woman that had gotten in an accident. And she said that she didn't want to be on life support. And her husband fought the courts and deemed a feeding tube life support. So she's not on life support where she's like got an oxygen machine where if you unplug it, they die in moments. She's not on heart monitoring machines where if you turn them off, she dies. She's on a feeding tube where if you remove her life support, that it will take her a couple weeks to pass, which it did. And that set precedent. And so my son didn't have a feeding tube until right at the end of his life, but he ended up with a feeding tube. But prior to him even having a feeding tube, because I am his source of food, I am now considered his life support. He has no viability. So viability means an ability to live. His body has failure to thrive. If I stop feeding him, he will die of natural causes, right? So this is in the United States today. So it was an easy choice for me to work on Unplanned because people need to know that this isn't just about a clump of cells inside of a woman's uterus. This is about life inside of a woman, and that they're extending this now. They're increasing this and, legally killing people. And just because also, we're talking about gun control today, right? Yeah, just because something's legal or illegal still doesn't make it right or wrong and doesn't mean that people aren't going to do it. So I worked on that project. People said, you're going to commit career suicide already. You're just starting your career as a filmmaker. And I said, well, we have to tell honest stories. They're telling stories on HBO on Unpregnant. They're talking about how to actually get girls to have an abortion and how, this young lady needed to get there. And so I said, we need to be honest. We need to tell people the truth. And if they have a hard time swallowing that pill, let's let them deal with it. And I'm more afraid of God than I am of my career. So that was the first one where I made a very hard career choice, not necessarily a life choice. And from that project, what had happened, the day our film goes to the theaters, Twitter had taken down our account. And they said it was a glitch. It was an accident. And we had hundreds of thousands of followers. So we actually experienced censorship before it was cool. And our executive producer, Joe Knopp and Daryl Lefevre, went out and they met with Mike Pence and Laura Trump. And our executive producer became really good friends with Laura Trump, which led us to our next project, which is behind us, which is The Trump I Know. So we actually got to go out and film President Trump in the White House, 31 women within the business, the family, and the campaign. We turned the project around in 3 months. We were getting ready to have it all ready to go before the elections in 2020. And nobody would let us put it on the platform. Amazon delayed it. We had it ready. We went through the QC process. Google delayed it. Apple Play delayed it. So one of the platforms let us have it on the day after the election. The next one, Google and Apple let us have it on in late December, months afterwards. And so we're dealing with censorship again. Facebook took our t-shirts and our sweatshirts and our tank tops off of there, saying that they violated their policies and that we could be buying or selling alcohol or buying or selling live animals. And it clearly in the picture is a t-shirt. And so I went back and I wrote them and I said, can you review this? This is what we're selling. This is what we're buying. And they said, we've reviewed it and we're taking all of your gear down. And people would try to leave us reviews and it just went, we've just been shadow banned. And so people would say, we haven't heard about this project. It's been out for 2 years. We haven't heard about it until the amazing people over at Epic Times premiered it just May 16th, and we've had over 400,000 people view it in a very short amount of time.
Wow. That's amazing. And I have it on the screen as premieres May 16th, just so they know that it's out, out. So even though we're past May 16th, it's out. It is. And so where can they view it? I'm sorry, so you can repeat that.
So they can view it on Epic TV. And so if you go, you go to Epic Times, it costs $1 for a subscription for 2 months. It's $99 for a year. Epic TV is part of Epic Times and NTD family. And the amazing thing about them is I wake up to their news because, as you know and I know, all the mainstream media right now is just so, they're just going with propaganda after propaganda after propaganda, and they're on to the latest and greatest. They're not reporting any truth out there, and if they are, they're doing it with some kind of bend or some kind of sleight of hand, different things like that. So Epic TV is phenomenal, but they also have Epic Times, which is their written print, and I read all of their stuff every day. And then they have NTD News, which is a part of their news, keeping people up on current events, and they're actually, producing the truth.
Well, I am so grateful to meet you. I had no idea this was your story, and so you've just touched my heart so much. I have so many dots to connect with you off the air. We have so many dots. I can't even begin to tell you. That's why I love this, because, again, I love in the movie The Chosen where Jesus is sitting with Matthew and he's scribing for Jesus, and he looks at Jesus and says, I just don't understand what this all means. Why are you saying all this? And Jesus in The Chosen smiles, this really nice smile to Matthew, and he says, oh, it's so people's lives, Matthew, can be transformed. Yeah. And it was like the Holy Spirit had shared that same thing with me, Joy, 4 weeks before I watched this. I mean, the exact same words. The exact same words. And I love, in AA, there's a saying that says, look for the similarities instead of the differences. So when we hear story and there's storytelling, because we should all know our stories so that we can share it with the world. And so when we share our stories in the audience, instead of sitting there and going, oh, wow, poor Joy, she went through this, I never went through that. Instead of going down that rabbit hole that, oh, your life was harder than mine, or your life was bigger than mine, or smaller than mine, just take parts of a story and look for the similarities in it, and then connect the dots of that similarity with your own, and your life will be so transformed.
Yeah. And I always tell people my life is different hard than yours. You know, we all have different hardships. The most amazing thing is that we have a God that loves us, that wants to partner with us, that wants to bring us strength, that wants to bring us hope. And that's the similarity that we all have. We all have access to the Holy Spirit. We all have access to Jesus, what he did on the cross for us. We all have access to God by what Jesus did. And I think that is so key. And my heart is different than I haven't been raped. You know, I haven't had some experiences that other people have experienced that, I mean, wow, they're crushing. One of my friends, Nicole McCaw, right now over at Rise.tv is doing a film on sex trafficking at the border and the things that have been happening and taking place on why we need to have closed borders. It's not because we don't like people. It's because we want to protect people. Exactly. And I said, girl, like that documentary, it'd be so hard for me to do just because of the content, you know, not because I wouldn't want to tell the truth, but she actually has what it takes and the God-given ability to go out there and expose some of the hardships that are going on there. And I'm glad that God didn't call me to that story because, that's just...
Well, there's a reason we're connected, and so I'm going to just see where the Lord takes us here. Yeah. Because, I've had the blessing of the Lord bringing this connection show together so that people can start hearing story, and really connecting the dots. So we're going to end at this point here, Joy, and I'm going to just encourage everyone. I showed you Joy's bio and her website, Speropictures.com. And so connect with Joy more fully and hear more about the pictures that they have upcoming. Their website shows you some of the works they're doing, and you'll definitely want to keep following. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks. And people can connect with us on Locals. We're going to be doing a show live once a week on Locals, and people can ask us questions and get to know us more personally and see the projects that we have coming up too. So thank you so much, Jill, for having me on here and getting to share with your audience.
Great. Stay on, and we're just going to end now, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us. Bye now. Thanks for joining us today on The Connection Show, where we bring you stories that will transform your life. The Connection Show would appreciate your support. Please go to either our Patreon page or our PayPal Me Now link today. We love our podcast show guests and appreciate our listeners and YouTube subscribers. Please go to our YouTube channel called The Connection Show and Braveheart Workshops and subscribe now. Remember to click the gray bell in the All tab so you don't miss any upcoming episodes.